All right, well, Habakkuk part 6. How about that? I wanted to start out today just taking a bit of a timeout to explain my voice. I haven't listened to the past few episodes, frankly, because I do not want to. But I'm pretty sure my voice doesn't sound the greatest, so I just wanted to let you know that I am working at a camp over the summer. And I've been losing my voice consistently every week. So going through this Bible study has honestly been really beneficial while being at camp. Since I get to talk to a lot of campers about prayer all the time. But for the next 7 weeks or so, just bear with my voice. There may be some good weeks and there may be some bad weeks. So I apologize if it sounds really bad and it's hard to listen to. I will just keep drinking coffee and throat coat tea and try to maintain a somewhat audible voice. But last week it was actually really cool because last week I actually got to talk to a boy in my cabin. He was a junior camper about prayer. And one of the things that I do every night in the cabin is we have our cabin devotion time. Sometimes we'll have a program staff come in and just share their testimony with the boys, or we'll just talk and kind of discuss the messages that day. But then at the end of the day, I try to pray with the campers before we go to bed. And I like to mention each of their names in prayer and mention some specific details about what they're learning at camp, or just specific things about each of the campers, and thanking the Lord for putting them in my cabin. So on the last night of last week, I prayed, and it was really late because we stayed up really late talking, and everyone was drifting off to sleep. Some of them were already snoring. And one of the boys actually asked me, he said, "How do you pray like that?" He said that whenever I pray, it sounds like I'm actually talking to God, instead of it sounding like God being far away, or it sounding just like a memorized prayer or something. So I actually got to talk to him a little bit about just talking to the Lord and what it is to pray and to talk to God, to communicate with God. And basically I told him, one of the things that I told him was, the more you pray, the more comfortable here goes my voice. The more you pray, the more comfortable you get talking with God, because it's a relationship. The better you get to know God and the more time you spend with Him, then the longer you'll want to pray, the more things you'll want to share with the Lord and talk to Him about in prayer. And that's what the book of Habakkuk is all about. One of the things that camp has showed me this year is how much we need prayer. I think even one of the directors here said that prayer is one of the missing ingredients in the lives of many Christians. Most Christians, we don't spend enough time in prayer. And that's what I love about Habakkuk. I've even gotten to share with campers some truths that I've learned just through studying this book. And that's why we're going through it right now. If you think back to last time, we kind of wrapped up with God's answer to the first prayer. So the book of Habakkuk covers 3 different prayers. And we've looked at the prayer of inquisition. Today we're looking at the second prayer, which is Habakkuk's prayer of opposition, where he kind of comes back and he doesn't like the answer that God gave him. And last time we read that answer that God responded to him, God's initial response to Habakkuk, and it wasn't what he wanted to hear at all. God basically said that he was going to do something. He was going to make the people double astonished. He was going to do something that anyone that heard it would marvel wondrously. And he said, "I will work a work in your days which you will not believe, though it be told you." And then he starts to unpack this. Basically, the Chaldeans would march through the entirety of Israel and bring terrible violence. They would destroy, they would take captives, as many as the sand. There's one verse that I don't know that I mentioned specifically last week, and it's verse 10. So Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 10. And it says, "And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn unto them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust and take it." And I wasn't totally sure what that meant at first, but through some study and just looking at the verse and meditating on it, really what the Lord is saying is that the strongest defenses that the Jews had would be about as useful as dust. They would deride every stronghold, for they should heap dust and take it. So basically, the defense of Israel wasn't going to be very effective at all. It would be about as useful as dust. And God is telling all this bad news to Habakkuk, and he's basically saying judgment is coming. And he tells him later on, wait for it, it's coming. And this is going to happen soon. It's going to happen in Habakkuk's day, that this destruction is going to come on the people of Israel because of their sin. And God knew that the Chaldeans would attribute the victory to their pagan gods. He knew that from the beginning, but he chose to use them anyways. So now we're going to read verses 12 and 13. This is the beginning of the second prayer that's covered in the book of Habakkuk. So Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 12. He prays and he says, "Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, mine Holy One? We shall not die, O Lord. Thou hast ordained them for judgment, and Almighty God, thou hast established them for correction. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he." Now these are some strong accusations from the mouth of Habakkuk. He's praying to God, and the first thing that I notice in these two verses, this isn't the whole prayer. His prayer actually goes to the very end of chapter 1, but we're just going to look at these two verses today. The first thing that he does is he claims God as his own. Now that's really important, because even when he gets this response from the Lord that he doesn't like, right? Like he doesn't appreciate God's answer. This isn't what he wanted to hear from God. And I think in our own life, like how often do we not like God's plan initially? God, in his response, he gave Habakkuk some insight into his plans and purposes. And Habakkuk wasn't very happy about the answer to his prayer. And I think that happens in our life. Sometimes we'll pray and ask God something, and then when God responds and he answers, it's not the response that we were looking for. Maybe it's not what we want to hear. And oftentimes we don't like God's plan initially. But he starts out and he says, "Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, mine Holy One?" And he starts going through God's attributes, and he's saying, basically, God, you are from everlasting. You are holy. And he says, we shall not die, O Lord. Thou hast ordained them for judgment, talking about the Chaldeans. So he's saying, God, you're going to use them for judgment, and you're going to establish them for correction. The word establish means founded. So these people are founded for our correction. You're going to use them in this way. Then he says, thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil. So he's going back and he's basically laying claim to God's attributes to argue his point. He's saying, God, you're a holy God. You wouldn't let this happen. Your eyes are pure. You wouldn't watch evil happen. He says, you can't look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue? So he's saying, God, if you're holy and you're totally set apart from anything wicked, anything corrupt, then how can you hold your tongue when you say that someone wicked is going to devour the righteous? And that's what he says at the very end. How holdest thou thy tongue when the wicked devoureth a man that is more righteous than he? So Habakkuk has totally changed his tune. But the point is, don't let anything prevent you from talking to God. Even if you don't like God's initial answer to your prayer, go to him about it. And he promises to give wisdom to those who ask in true faith. That's what James 1:5 says. So we'll pick this up next time. I hope you pray to God throughout the day.